Hello and welcome to Media Lit, where we treat each piece of media like great literature. Joining me once again today is Kris Ingersoll. He is an actor and voice actor and my new favorite nerd. If you've been with us before, you know that Kris is a huge Batman fan. And I got all sorts of positive feedback from folks who heard Kris for the first time on that episode. But I also received the deepest criticism of myself as a host. And that is, I left a really important journalistic question sitting on the table. Kris revealed that he owns more than one bat suit in our previous episode. And despite the fact that that ripe fruit was sitting right there on the ground, I did not ask the obvious follow-up question. Kris, how many bat suits? And tell me the story of these. You know, which Batmen are they most associated with? What sort of use do they get?
Yeah, I mean, a fair curiosity. I think I set myself up for that one. And first of all, just super stoked to be back. Thank you for inviting me to join you again. Also really thrilled to be having these nerd conversations with you, one of my favorite new folks. So the most notable batsuit I have, the most recognizable batsuit I have is my Adam West. I've got the Ruby's costume, Adam West, zip up jumpsuit, classic cowl. That was a Halloween piece, which now just gets tons of regular action as my go-to batsuit for time with my daughter. It's got a really sweet utility belt, the whole thing. The gloves are a bit wonky. It's my only complaint, but a solid cape, solid cowl. And then I think I've got like a Keaton style cowl. That
Yes,
or
I've
my
seen this
Adam,
one.
right? Yeah, that or my Adam West cowl each get play in different makeshift versions of my bat suits. So I have got like a straight up Keaton look with a nice yellow back bat emblem.
Mm-hmm.
Tight fitting shirt goes over some armor, and I'm ready to go. Again, former Halloweens, now just daily costume play. It's got to be, so I don't ramble on forever, at least 5 different unique looking bat suits that I can cobble together through various parts, whether it's my batarangs, my more tactical looking bat suit. I've got like a black on gray, more Bale era Batman vibe. These are all the like Under Armour alter ego compression fit tees that pair over various costume elements to make a decent look.
It's amazing stuff. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kris. Yeah, I too am loving our chats. I think we have many more of them in our future, and I'm looking forward to them. So yeah, back when we talked about Batman Returns, I was editing that episode. We had so much to say. I had to make some cuts, including a little sidebar I went off on about my love for Doctor Who and that being a formative hero for me. And after the episode, after providing a homework assignment for me last time, Kris, you were willing to let me throw some homework your way. And I challenged you to watch some Doctor Who. And you ultimately came back with a really creative way to get at this topic of Doctor Who and one of the oldest fandoms out there. Now, before I reveal exactly how we're going to get at Doctor Who, I just want to take a moment to establish the fact that you are, in fact, a Doctor Who newbie. All right.
Hoobie.
So, yeah, exactly. And I just want to throw a couple of terms that will mean a lot to Doctor Who fans out there into the ether. And I'm just curious if you have, through social osmosis, absorbed what some of these terms might be, or have an educated guess as to what the heck we're talking about. I think you'll find some of these questions have great answers, and some of them have answers that even Doctor Who fans argue about. So don't feel too badly.
Oh, okay. I'm
But
glad you said that because this was the part I was most afraid of. So let's go.
all right. Kris, do you have any idea what I'm talking about if I reference the TARDIS?
Okay. I have, through social osmosis, absorbed enough who I think to be able to answer this relatively confidently. A TARDIS is a time machine, shaped like a phone booth, but more like a spaceship on the inside. That's my general understanding. The TARDIS is the Doctor's go-to mode of transportation as he traverses time.
That's beautiful, Kris. You've got that pretty much exactly right. I don't think you said a single thing that is incorrect. but there is even more to unpack and discover below the surface there. I won't try to unpack all of it today because we've got episodes worth of TARDIS lore. But yeah, the that name stands for time and relative dimension in space.
It's an acronym.
It sure is. It is an
Uh,
acronym.
I didn't know that.
Uh, so we are moving through space, time, and arguably sometimes even dimension. This one's a little bit of a deeper cut. Uh, do you have any guess of what I might be talking about if I referenced a chameleon circuit?
Uh, no, no, it's the first time. That wasn't even in. Uh, no, no. I can only imagine that is some sort of a component part which can
Hmm.
take on various functions as needed for the Doctor. Hoping that it's aptly named chameleon.
You kept that, I think, just broad enough to be more or less correct. This was this was one of my favorite bits of Doctor Who lore to learn when I was a newbie to the Who universe. And now this phone box shaped TARDIS from the past, from London's past. Uh, the reason it looks that way is because the TARDIS is a creation of the Time Lords. And these machines, when they travel through time and space, they have a chameleon circuit, which allows them to blend in, to appear as something you might expect to see in the background, so as to not draw attention. And the chameleon circuit allows the TARDIS to do this. However, the chameleon circuit on the Doctor's TARDIS is broken, and they've never chosen to fix it. They love the style of the blue box, and it's here to stay.
So once upon a time, the Doctor was on an adventure. The chameleon circuit was working. It took the form of a phone box in London, and it's just been stuck that way ever since.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, if I was able to entice any Doctor Who fans to, sign in, listen to this podcast, I just want to be straight with you right now. I am a newbie when it comes to classic Who. I came in with the 2005 version. Uh, I got into this around the 50th anniversary special in the year or two leading up to that, when BBC America was posting all sorts of explainers on the doctors, a lot of historical documentaries and things like that. So I absorbed as much as I could, but I don't have that full story connection that I should have. But my understanding, Chris, is the doctor was kind of camped out on Earth for a while, more or less in hiding, more or less off the adventuring trail, and kind of got pushed back into this life of more of a traveler and a hero to some, a danger to others. Yeah.
Interesting. I assume that
Yes,
has something to
yes.
do with why he's a British man.
We can apply some story elements to that if we'd like, but I think maybe this is a creation of the BBC, and that is
Right.
the main reason.
Right.
All right. Next question. Uh, what is a Dalek?
A, a Twilight, a Twi'lek from Texas?
That is an absolutely beautiful guess. This is the most iconic of all Doctor Who villains. Uh, they would appear to be robots if you don't know Doctor Who. Uh, they
Hmm.
famously kind of jokingly look like a salt shaker. They have a little attachment sticking out the front that is a plunger. It's in some ways this very silly, low budget prop from the past. But it's also struck this iconic look and been spiced up and jazzed up for the modern Who era in different ways. But they are not robots. There are living biological beings inside. They destroyed their own planet in becoming warlike. Um, they believe themselves to be a superior race, and they are the main rivals of the Doctor and all Time Lords. Uh, you may have heard their famous refrain, "Exterminate."
Yes. Yes. Okay. But
So
they are organic beings?
underneath all that armor, yeah, they had to build this armor to survive their own planet. They destroyed it so horribly through nuclear war and other elements, it became uninhabitable in their natural biological form.
Wow. What a totally unfamiliar, not at all haunting potential reality.
Yeah, still quite relevant. Sad to say how true that is. All right, I've got two more of these, and then I will stop torturing you, Kris. But what is a sonic screwdriver?
A real tasty cocktail, and maybe a blue one.
There must be some really delicious custom cocktails out there named after the sonic screwdriver. I love that it's blue. Uh, so my understanding is the sonic screwdriver was an occasional prop from the classic Who days. It's basically to use the parlance of Across the Spider-Verse. It's a goober.
It's a
It's a
goober.
little mechanical device. It can do anything it needs to do in the moment until it can't. It can calculate. It can manipulate matter. It seems to do just about anything and everything. And even fans can't agree on what a sonic screwdriver is. Every once in a while, they try to change up the form and look of the sonic screwdriver, and there's sometimes an outcry from fans. But as I've known it in New Who, most of the time, it's just a little more or less screwdriver shaped thing with a blinking light on the end that kind of became larger and more phallic as the seasons went on.
Yes, that's
Uh, but they're fun props to own. I own one prop sonic screwdriver from the David Tennant era. So there you
okay.
go.
I feel like sci-fi genre storytelling in general, it needs goobers, right? Like at some point,
Oh yeah,
the science breaks down. You're just being imaginative, and you need a thing that fans won't think too long and hard about, right?
absolutely. And this final one is one I think you probably have some idea of what I'm talking about here. But what is a regeneration in the context of Doctor Who?
Regeneration is the method by which one doctor becomes the next iteration of the doctor that we as TV viewers will come to know.
Yeah, one of the most brilliant sci-fi inventions of all time to keep a franchise alive. The Doctor will retain their memories, but become a new person with a new personality, a new vibe, a new energy. They don't forget who they were, but they're a slightly new version of themselves, and there's so much to unpack there psychologically, as we human beings become new versions of ourselves through the years. So that's one of my favorite things about this character.
That's really interesting to me that the memories are retained, but there's a way in which they try and portray that there is a different personality at work, right? And not a personality that grew out of the old one, but a totally different one.
Exactly. And if I ever entice you back for a future Doctor Who episode, I'm sure we'll talk about this. I love to theorize about what some of the previous companions do to inspire the new version of the Doctor on a subconscious level. I think they're often, to a certain extent, a response to the people that the Doctor has traveled with, and I love that about the regenerations.
Very cool.
All right, uh, moving on to the personal bespoke torture chamber I just set up for Kris. We're going to move on to the next section. I already covered some of this ground where I just want to establish my Doctor Who credentials. I would say I am fairly well versed in New Who starting back in 2005 and up through the present. I've remained a fairly loyal fan throughout most of that. Although I will admit to falling into a little bit of a hiatus a few years ago around the COVID era. There wasn't as much volume from the fandom anymore. There was so much great television on. Life was busy. I kind of fell off of some of my Doctor Who watching for a bit, but was really happy to finally catch back up in the past year leading up to the recent 60th anniversary special, and a newfound burst of energy and excitement for the franchise. So I'm on board. In the last few months, I've started doing some coverage for the Pop Break online magazine, where I reviewed the 60th anniversary specials, and I made some fun podcast appearances talking about it. And somewhere in that process, I became a champion for Jodie Whittaker's 13th Doctor. And, I found that those are the best of the Doctor Who fans, are the folks who stand for Jodie Whittaker, are a great crew. So it's been a good time.
I think you sound bona fide to me, man. At least new Who
Oh,
bona
thank you.
fide.
Thank you. So, Kris, we know you're a Batman fan. We know you are new to Who. We established
Mm.
this. When it comes to the realm of sci-fi, do you have any favorite franchises or stories? These could be films, movies, books, whatever, comics.
Totally. I mean, I'm a Star Wars kid. I remember uh the trilogy on VHS that my dad's best friend, my Uncle Murph, bought for us when I was probably too young to be watching full Star Wars movies. I guess perhaps not. What do you really know when you're a kid? And so I remember that box. I remember the gold Vader head on it. And so I was Star Wars, not Star Trek, not for any dislike of Star Trek. It just wasn't really a part of my world. I remember Next Generation on when I was a kid, but no one in my life watched it. My friends didn't. And so I was squarely, if you asked me a versus question, it was very squarely a Star Wars kid. And then just like general, I'm a movie head. My family was big on movies, so absorbed a ton of sci-fi that way. E.T., Aliens, Contact was a favorite sci-fi flick for me. That did a great job of blending the philosophical, the religious, the sci-fi. That was a great ride. Planet of the Apes. I'm ashamed to say
Hmm.
that as a kid, not knowing any better, the Mark Wahlberg Planet of the Apes film was just like fun for me. I can't imagine how well it holds up with some distance, but as a kid, that worked just fine. And I thought that was such a cool concept. I was really taken with it.
Hmm.
But then I'm excited to mention when I knew this question was coming. Do you remember Galaxy Quest? Are you a fan at all of Galaxy Quest?
Such a fun movie. I absolutely loved that movie.
Right? I'm like a low key Justin Long super fan. I'm like really
Oh,
invested in
lovely, lovely.
the ongoing career of Justin Long. Shout out to
Hmm.
Goosebumps, great little series this past winter. So Galaxy Quest for me is like that Star Trek surrogate. I don't know anything about Star Trek really, other than what was portrayed on Galaxy Quest.
My Trekkie background is light. I had a cousin who was a big Star Trek: The Next Generation fan, so I would kind of like hang around and watch some episodes here and there with her. I thought, Sir Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard was this very cool, striking figure. I was fascinated by him, fascinated by his resemblance to Professor X of the X-Men, even before he was inevitably cast in that role. We all knew it was coming.
Right.
Uh, I think when the movie came out, I think I deeply wanted to believe that I was the only person who ever made that connection beforehand. Yeah, before realizing how silly that is, because it's the most obvious casting choice, perhaps, of all time. Um,
Yeah, it's like one you wonder which came first. Did they start drawing Professor X to look like Patrick Stewart or what? I think that happened with Nick Fury and
mm,
Sam Jackson. I'm fairly certain that he was drawn in the comic books to look like Sam Jackson before Samuel L. Jackson was ever cast in the role.
yeah, and I think without his permission as
Yeah,
well, if I'm not mistaken. Yes,
I think so. And they were just like, "Yeah, totally, we did that, and we would love it if we could keep doing that."
I guess it ultimately worked out okay for Marvel, in the end,
Yeah, and Samuel L. Jackson as well, right?
for sure, for sure.
Secret Invasion aside.
I love all of your call outs. I would say my pre-Who sci-fi background is pretty similar to yours. Um, the only other influence I would add in there is, in my post-college years, I was going through a lot of genre television I had missed, and one other show I blew through just before Doctor Who for the first time was the 2004 reboot of Battlestar Galactica,
Mm,
and that trampoline to the forefront of my science fiction just knowledge and viewpoint, and to see what a raw show that was, like with all the sci-fi. It was such a realistic uh response to the politics of the world in that time period. It was really beautiful. Doctor Who, it can do all of those things too. It can be camp, it can be silly, it can be fun, but it can hit some dark and grim and serious notes from time to time. And I think you got a taste of that for the episode you watched today. Now, Kris, the way this show works is I invite guests on to assign me a homework assignment, and then if I can convince them to come back, I'll often throw a homework assignment their way. We can go back and forth. We can find some things to do together. But for this visit, because this was homework, I kind of pushed you in the direction of. I was hoping you could jump into the host chair for a second, and ask me a
ooh,
couple of those personal formative questions about what Doctor Who means to me.
Yeah, I am so excited to learn more about who from you. So let me get my little host hat on. Randy, what is an early and or important memory connected to Doctor Who?
I graduated from college, had my own television and computer and some money at my disposal. Streaming through Netflix was becoming more and more manageable. More and more things became available. I watched all of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I watched Battlestar Galactica. Doctor Who was on my list of things to try. And I finally got there. And additionally, this was a tough moment in my life because these were also during the years that my father was struggling with ALS before he passed away about a decade ago. Um, so sharing stories with him was something that was really valuable, and it was also quite a comfort after we lost him because I was really close with my father and we had a really special relationship. And he was a very cerebral guy who liked to think and who loved stories. So great storytelling, I think, really helped me feel connected to him. So I think there was something about this doctor character who
Mm,
wants to think first, who wants to negotiate first, who wants to problem solve first, uh, who doesn't always want to be vulnerable, but is capable of showing emotional vulnerability. He's not wrapped up in machismo and toxic masculinity most of the time. We're gonna have to take the doctor to task at certain points in his tenure, but at the end of the day, he's a guy who likes to think more than he likes to fight. And yeah, just my life was changing as I was falling in love with Doctor Who. Um, the day that I found out my wife was pregnant with our first child,
mm.
you know, uh, as much as I love Doctor Who, it's the memory of learning I was going to be a dad that matters here. But because that's such a powerful moment, I specifically remember, hitting pause on a season 3 episode of Doctor Who, Gridlock, because my wife wanted to chat with me. And, turned out this was the conversation we were having. So I'm not sure how long it took me to get back to finish that episode. But I eventually got there. But I remember being interrupted specifically in that moment because it was such a formative moment. And yeah, I've got a really great family. So I even got to do some bonding with my sister and my mother. We watched a lot of Doctor Who together in some of those days when we were all hanging out. So yeah, there's a deep family connection there for me.
Oh man, that is really beautiful. I think it's one of my favorite things about story, right? How well
Hmm.
they connect us while we're together, and how they bind us even when we're apart. I'm really glad that Who has been that for you. What a beautiful story. Um, cool, man. Well, let me ask you next. How does this piece of media influence your interests, your values, your style? Is there any Who in you now, Randy?
Oh, for sure, for sure. I think I started to step on the toes of this answer when I was talking about my relationship with my dad and what this doctor represents. That's probably the most important part of the answer, but on a more superficial aesthetic level, really love all things British, English. Love that whole background. Uh, you know, I was a big Monty Python fan. Monty Python and the Holy Grail was transformative for me. I would occasionally catch some flying circus on PBS or whatever. My aunt, who used to babysit us quite a bit, watched a lot of PBS, so I spent a lot of time watching Are You Being Served with her, old 70s British sitcom. And I was so little, I don't think any of it ever made sense to me, but I think there was something about the delivery and the vibe and the energy that I was enjoying, even if I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Um, and then my family unapologetically absolutely loves Mr. Bean and all things Rowan Atkinson. Mr. Bean is one of those things that's an acquired taste, and if it's not for someone, I get it. I can wrap my mind around it. But if you're the type of person who loves Mr. Bean, there's a really good chance we're going to get along. And then Rowan Atkinson, beyond that character, is just such a brilliant comic actor. He's got so much clever stand up. But the reason I'm ending on Mr. Bean here uh, is I had no idea Mr. Bean was my first exposure to Doctor Who, because there was a Mr. Bean sketch that I would watch with my family all the time. In this bit, Mr. Bean is at a toy store, and for whatever reason, this toy store is selling a nativity scene. So what happens is the camera pans over to a close up on the nativity scene, and you see Mr. Bean's hands come down into the scene, and he is playing with the figurines like they're toys. Uh, and he starts like marching other toys into the scene, like soldiers and things. And the wise men are all like shushing the toys as they come in, and like a dinosaur, like, T-Rex comes in at one point. He's having a great time. He's doing all the Rowan Atkinson sound effects. Uh, and at one point, these little robot toys come into the scene, and it was just part of the joke for me. And then I rewatched it after becoming a Doctor Who fan to realize they were little Dalek toys. They were not robots. They were Daleks. And Mr. Bean was kind of saying the little exterminate line in his sort of like half speech that Mr. Bean would do. And my life came full circle in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, who was absent from your life until the right time, right? It was always waiting for you, but it had to be the right time. And I love that these Daleks were coming for the little baby Christ. Like that's brilliant.
I will have the Christ figure in the nativity scene is ultimately rescued from all the chaos. Is how it ends.
Lovely, lovely. Yeah, Herod's agents, the Daleks, cannot succeed. Awesome, awesome.
Lovely.
Well, lastly, let me challenge you a little bit and poke at that Who love, because you do love this show, but can you objectively say that it has any flaws?
Absolutely. The very first episode of New Who is many fans one of their favorite episodes, Rose. And they are correct, because storytelling wise, it makes a lot of smart choices and how to introduce character. It also has a couple sequences of some of the campiest camp Doctor Who has to offer. And in the moment, I wasn't ready for it yet. I was coming, hot off of Battlestar Galactica, this gritty wartime story. And to see some of the camp and some of the bad makeup effects for some things, I was not in the right headspace. And I was like, not for me. And I let it sit for a few months before episode 2. And I like that one a little bit better. And I let it sit a little bit. And it slowly started to pick up steam before it became an unstoppable force. And I was just in it. The moment that shifted me was my first introduction to Daleks, but that's a conversation for another day. And the only other flaw with Doctor Who is because it's been around for so long, through so many time periods, through so many eras, so many creators, so many showrunners, there is a hell of a lot of mythology. And this show cannot continue to function without sometimes doubling back on itself, contradicting itself. Occasionally, there might be a story beat or a piece of lore that means a lot to you that you will feel has been minimized in some way by a new storyline. Now, that means, like any fandom, there is a toxic side of Doctor Who fandom, and people who get a little bit carried away with the elements that they feel the most married to. But the Doctor Who fan I have mostly become, and the Doctor Who fan that I love out there, are the people who are willing to love it despite all of that, to accept that that's part of the fandom, that that's part of the fun, and to lean into the fun of watching the character evolve and reach new audiences. So I think you need to know that going in and be ready to be okay with it. Because that being said, it can still be a little bit frustrating from time to time. There's one of my favorite decisions New Who ever made was kind of undone in a single episode at one point, in a way that really bummed me out, because it was something I was looking forward to mining for new material for years to come, that became kind of a closed loop. So it does run the risk of that. But obviously I love this show.
I suppose that's true of a lot of genre storytelling, especially any that has any legs to it and goes on for an extended period of time, right? And comic books are very much that way. And we both know comic book fandom can be awfully toxic because you get hung up on the stuff that you really care about. The good news is anything that's been undone can be undone again and redone, and it can all be very circular. So I hope for your sake that whatever that storyline was, I hope it comes back around with a little bit more heft.
Absolutely, absolutely, and they actually managed to find some more ways to milk it after I thought it was completely done. But Kris, you agreed to watch some Doctor Who, but you had some really creative ideas about maybe where you would start with your Doctor Who fandom. So, my question for you is, before I pushed you in the direction of Who, did you have any interest in entering into this fandom? And two, what are we watching today, and how did we pick it?
Okay. So before your gentle push into the pool of Who, I was beginning to feel like this was a gap in my own sci-fi nerd knowledge. I needed to at least get some experience under my belt, right? Watch a few episodes, take in a few seasons. I had recently been listening to, I think we both love The House of R, Joanna Robinson, Mallory Rubin. Mal this year did her own Who familiarizing so that she could join Joe for the specials that came out around Christmas time. And hearing them go down that journey together, I didn't listen to those episodes because I wanted to get in. So I didn't listen to any of their Who recaps. But as they began to talk about it, I said, okay, maybe now is the time. Maybe I should find room in my life for some Who. And then just a few weeks ago, a very specific episode was mentioned on an episode of Trial by Content, another podcast that I think we both love.
Mm-hmm.
They mentioned Heaven Sent as perhaps the perfect episode, not quite a bottle episode, but something that could be viewed in isolation. Like if you had never seen any Who at all, Joanna mentioned Heaven Sent might be something you could watch and still enjoy. So yeah, when it came time to decide how we would enter Who together, I said, let's test that theory. It came up again on the time loop episode of Trial by Content. Dave, Neil, and Joanna talked a little bit more about Heaven Sent. I said, yeah, this is perfect. I need to watch this episode and find out how well it really works on its own. So yeah, I was thrilled to have watched this episode now a handful of times in preparation for the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you for that great prep, by the way. I'm going to take a moment to prep our listeners just a little bit here. Last time I wrote a whole summary of Batman Returns, and I think I somehow managed to make the recap of this one episode of television longer, which I did not think was going to happen, but there's a lot going on here. So,
and you'll love it, Randy. That comes from love.
It's true. As always, let me know if you catch anything that feels off, or maybe I failed to emphasize something that was essential to you in this episode. There is surprisingly a lot jammed into this time loop. So here we go. Heaven Sent. The Doctor materializes inside of a teleportation tube, still writhing with anger over the death of his companion, Clara. He barks out a warning to his unknown and unseen captors and gets to work assessing his surroundings, a strange, shifting castle. He soon learns that he is under constant threat from a slow-moving, veiled figure with creepy, inhuman hands. It never stops moving, and therefore neither can the Doctor. As the Doctor discovers an ocean full of skulls, a creepy garden, and a mysteriously resetting room, it becomes clear that he is imprisoned in some sort of elaborate puzzle. He often escapes into the recesses of his mind, which he visualizes as the interior of his TARDIS. He is often speaking to the absent Clara to help process his thoughts, and she eventually materializes in his mind for a pep talk. After a lot of mapping and exploring, the Doctor finds his way to the elusive Room 12. Inside, he finds a large block of asbantium, a mineral harder than diamond, and realizes it is blocking his escape. At this point, the Doctor experiences a shocking revelation when he realizes that the word bird, written in the sand, is a message from himself. He is referencing a fairy tale about a bird that sharpens its beak on a diamond mountain once every 100 years until the mountain is worn away. He realizes he is trapped in a time loop, and the only way out is to repeat the loop time and time again until he can punch through the Asbantium wall with his bare hands. While the Doctor is tempted to give up the information his captors are after, he decides to win and draws inspiration from the fairy tale. In the end, he exclaims, "You must think that's a hell of a long time." Personally, I think that's a hell of a bird. The Doctor escapes his prison after 4.5 billion years and sends a threatening message ahead to his captors. Kris, how'd I do?
You did fantastic. You nailed it. I think similar to the Batman Returns recap. It was detailed. It exemplified some of your own love for the episode. The only thing that I would want to highlight is right at the very beginning, because this was so impressionistic on me as a new viewer, right? The episode doesn't open with him coming into the teleporter writhing, and it's not that moment. First, there's the voiceover, the very dramatic voiceover. And it's who I will come to know as the Doctor, telling us, sharing a little philosophy. It sounds like he's talking about the nature of death, that from the moment you're born, also coming into life is your own death, which one day will eventually catch up to you. Now that monologue is happening over images of something, a person struggling to bring some gears, some machinery into motion. And then you see like a really disgusting, irradiated or burnt hand hit a sandy floor and completely dissipate. And then you get the Doctor in the teleporter. And so I wanted to highlight that only because it pulled me right into this episode. You know, from the moment it opened and that voiceover was happening, I needed to know more.
I really appreciate that edit, because you're right. We do start with that philosophical concept, and to then see them find a way to physically embody that in the veiled figure that's quite literally moving at that slow pace. It's poetry. My first question for you, Kris, I want to dig into this lesson here. I want to take a look at this episode as if it's a piece of literature. And my first question for you is, what are your impressions of Peter Capaldi as the 12th Doctor? What kind of impact did he make on you? And did he remind you of any other pop culture characters that mean something to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Peter Capaldi, as I said, that voiceover, I was immediately intrigued, right? There was a certain gravitas to that, and I wanted to know more. And then as he steps out of the teleporter and he makes these bold declarations, right? He picks up the sand and he's immediately threatening somebody, whoever it is that's put him in this puzzle box, whoever it is that's teleported him to this strange location. He is ready to go. He's seemingly arrogant, but prepared to back that arrogance up. So we'll call it arrogant as opposed to cockiness, right? I was getting Sherlock off of him in this episode, right? Somebody who's really brilliant. I mean, a genius is genius, and then cuts through what could be a dull personality with some beautiful dry wit, like a real sense of dark, dark wit. I understand how the world works, and I see the humor in it. I also got some Tony Stark with the arrogance that was coming through. So these were the first two hallmarks that Peter Capaldi's Doctor was giving me. Sort of an insufferable, I wrote in my notes, an insufferable genius with a heart of gold.
That's perfect. And you're right. He could absolutely build something with a box of scraps in a cave, no problem. Now, Kris, I asked you to go into this episode pretty blind. You might know this possibly from House of R or something else, but do you know that there's a very good reason why you were getting Sherlock vibes off of this Doctor at this point in Doctor Who's run?
No.
You are looking at the work of showrunner Stephen Moffat, also running the Benedict Cumberbatch-led Sherlock. So it's not a coincidence that we've got a very mind palace-y thing happening in the middle of this episode.
Okay. Yes, it was very specifically that Mind Palace sequence, right? Where now he's going to run you through all the little calculations he was making while you thought he was just dropping flowers and magnifying glasses and throwing chairs. I loved that sequence, but that was very specifically where it was giving me Sherlock. So that's funny to hear.
No, I absolutely love that. And again, as we've established, my impression of the Doctor is not just Capaldi, it's everyone. But I think I felt this the strongest with Capaldi. As far as my pop culture frames of reference for the Doctor, going into this fandom, the closest I could come would be like a Dumbledore or a Gandalf. That person who seems to have almost all of the answers. But what's so cool about the Doctor is there's this, again, sometimes the Doctor tries to hide it, but there is this vulnerability that we so rarely get from a Gandalf or a Dumbledore. It's like if you could break down and make the personal connections with those guys. I think that's why we love hobbits and the Shire so much. The hobbits seem to be the one beings that can sometimes cut through that with Gandalf a little bit. We get to see him being a human being. And I've always loved Gandalf more than maybe almost any literary character because he is this almost all powerful being, but he sees something beautiful in humanity and living life and love and human connection. And that's something the Doctor needs and appreciates as well. So yeah, that's something I absolutely love there. So thanks for those great answers. Now the Doctor's got all these angles. And part of that you've already alluded to is this strength of character, this gravitas, this confidence. Were there any particular moments that jumped out to you where this gravitas comes through? I mean, I know you talked about that initial like being ready to fight the second he pops out of the teleporter. But anything else that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, so that was the first thing I put in my notes, was that moment coming out because he immediately establishes himself as a badass. Whether or not he's physically capable, I don't know, but he's prepared to handle himself, right? But then also that first survival session, it's not necessarily what he's doing physically; it's the way he's walking us through it in his mind balance,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the sense of urgency in him, which only begins to mount once you realize that bit of sleight of hand that they've done. That he is not actually telling this story post survival in his TARDIS, that it's mid
Mm-hmm.
survival, while he's actually still falling through the air. He's bringing all this urgency in that moment. Capaldi is, and you're just wrapped, right? You watch every flick of his face, every movement of his body, and then during that last montage of escape efforts, as he's repeating the loop over and over again, and it's giving us each of those declarations of how much time has passed when he's up on the parapet and he's looking at the stars. 200 million years, 2 billion years. There's something in him then that is so shaken. He's just very present, and I'm there with him until finally, right? He's telling his fairy tale, and he's punching through the wall. Every bit of that
Mm-hmm.
is so engaging and so rich. And I just, like I said, I suspect that this character is a guy who you have to love in order to like. But in this
Mm-hmm.
moment, I'm with him, and I want him so desperately to escape this prison that he's been in, and that's all through Capaldi's performance.
I love the way you explain that, Chris, because like it is like the badass of it. It's the tough guy of it, Um, the first rule of being interrogated is you are the only irreplaceable person in the torture chamber. The room is yours, so work it. There's
So good.
that that
They
just
threaten you with
that
death. Die
badassery.
faster.
But like you said, it fits better with the vulnerability, right? A moment that really strikes me is fairly early in the episode. He admits to this image coming straight out of his nightmares, this memory of seeing a woman who's passed away and been covered with veils, and it's been haunting him since he was a young child. And that gives him weight too, especially like this version of the Doctor that's more advanced in years than some of the other actors that have played the part in New Who. Um, to admit that that's with him, and even he does this little silly like popping sound, this little mouth pop when he's describing that she died, and it's like he's trying to bring some sarcasm to it, but there's this honesty. And yeah, the whole ending sequence is great. I specifically noticed just his ability to sell his devastation in the moment where he pieces it together, where the bird and the diamond comes together, and you just see the weight of understanding on his face. Peter Capaldi is so talented.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought it back to the vulnerability because you're right. I did note too that it wasn't just in his braggadocious nature that I was taken in. It was also in those moments where he was ready to give up. Right, it's in
Hmm.
his initial fall. Right when he hits the water, he's like, it would just be so easy to just stay
Hmm.
asleep. Right, and then in the end,
Hmm.
after he realizes it's time loop, he's desperate to just can't I just lose? Why does it have to be me all the time? And he is so real in those moments, and you feel how
Hmm.
desperately a part of him really wants that, would prefer to just give in. Um, and it's manifested as Clara who won't let him, who pushes him to man up and win. But it's him. It's a part of his own self, right? Uh, Competing to keep fighting
Yeah.
or to give up, and he sells that beautifully.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a little peek into the crystal ball of the future. There's not a direct reference to this episode, uh, but in some of what was playing out in the recent 60th anniversary specials, I was thinking about this episode so much, that part of him that wants to just rest,
Mm.
that wants to give up for once, like thematically, that is so infused in the character, and you're going to benefit from this for a long time. I think it's so cool that this is one of your first looks at the Doctor, because that's something they play with in Rose, the beginning of New Who. They're playing with it up until the most recent episodes, so
Mm.
it's really fascinating. Because this is not the Doctor's first rodeo. This is not his first time experiencing time and finality in unique ways. So great stuff. All right. We'll have some more grim, deep thematic stuff to talk about later, but we talked about the gravitas. I just want to talk about where did you see Peter Capaldi's comic ability come through? Because the balance is what makes him so special to me.
Yeah, and I was interested to see this question because he isn't particularly jokey. In fact, he's got nobody to play
Hmm.
off of and nobody to make laugh around him or to react to anything he says or does. So it's not that he's jokey, but there is this undeniable wit. He's processing
Hmm.
everything he's going through with an incredible intelligence, and with that intelligence, a certain amount of ironic humor, right?
Hmm.
And Capaldi really sells that pretty well. And then to your point, he's downright silly in that moment where
Hmm.
he's sharing a childhood memory, and almost like the child comes out of him in that moment.
Oh
His face
yeah.
changes, his eyes light up a little bit differently, and then there's a few smirks, a few moments where he gives us a smile and a laugh, and it's all charm, right? So maybe
Hmm.
I can't on this example alone, without pretending I don't know anything else about Peter Capaldi. I would say perhaps he doesn't come across as immediately humorous, but a deeply
Hmm.
charming man.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got three on my list. I've got two here. One I'm going to save for later. But in terms of humor that he lands for me, and I think you're right that it's wit. There we can always tie it back to something meaningful. It's not just joking for the sake of joking. But early on, he's trying to get through that door. Um, he says you can't make a psychic link with a door. They're very cross, and he talks directly to the door. All that knocking, and it's never for you. Is such a fun way to look at a door.
If you are just a little bit nice, he says, again, so charming. Man, I wrote that down because I wasn't sure if we'd get to it. That was
Yeah,
a big
yeah,
moment for me in the episode of like, who is this guy? When I was young and
yeah.
what is he?
When I was young and telepathic.
Yeah, when I was young and telepathic, I'm like, who is this guy and what can he do?
It's wild. He's got quite a history. She's got quite a history. On our Slack channel, Chris, and the Doctor Who channels, some folks were piecing together the Doctor's long history with Harry Houdini. The Doctor gets around, man.
Is that a
Really
thing? Is he
does.
boys with Houdini?
Absolutely. And it would seem that he's boys with Houdini. Eventually it would seem that there's at least one romantic entanglement with Houdini, if not multiple. So
Lovely.
yeah, we've never seen it on screen, I don't think. And my other chuckle was just for the Brothers Grimm. They're lovely fellows. They're on my darts team.
I'm so curious. I was like, is there more to that, or was that just a one-off comment, or has he in fact spent some time throwing pointies with the Brothers Grimm?
I think the beautiful thing about the Doctor is the Doctor exists on such a grand scale. It's a little bit open to your interpretation how often the Doctor is referencing like a real relationship that has been maintained over time, and when the Doctor is just bullshitting, because
Hmm.
every version of the Doctor is great at bullshitting to buy time. Like it's a classic Doctor trait. Can I ramble on and distract and be gathering data and be quietly assessing the situation, like you pointed out earlier, checking the gravity, checking the position of the stars,
Hmm.
etc. In a way that the average audience member is not perceiving it, and there's so often a fun twist. Whether it's Peter Capaldi or Jodie Whittaker suddenly having a big revelation. The vibe and the energy might be a little bit different, but they're all so good at it. Whether it's a quieter, more cerebral Doctor, or one of the high energy sort of like I'm bouncing around the room doctors, they all have their way of doing it, which is great. All right. I've got a question I have to ask. I don't think we can linger here for too long because you're coming into Who as a newbie. I don't want to get carried away spoiling things for you. You have never met Clara. To what extent did that relationship come through for you coming into it without really any background or pre-existing relationship? What worked, what didn't, what questions do you have?
Um, in general, uh, I think I explained this to you in some of our exchanges pre-episode, but I'm watching the episode and it's so apparent how much the Doctor cares for this woman, Clara. And it's also really apparent that she had a deep, uh, a meaningful impact on him, right? She affected him in some way. She wasn't just the person he spent time with, but she affected him. I wonder if he wasn't his best self with her. That was kind of the vibe I was getting off this guy. Um, and I think I explained to you that couldn't tell if it was romantic or with the seeming age gap, more father daughter, mentor mentee. What was very apparent to me, what was totally obvious, was that this person was somebody he spent a ton of meaningful time with, that this person was a companion. Like I know enough from pop culture to know that's formally what the partner to the Doctor is called. Without being able to better nail down the nature of their relationship, a companion was the best descriptor I could really come up with. Um,
Yeah.
and I felt that was not necessarily in the moments where she's on screen, because she's mostly got her back to you and she's drawing on a chalkboard, right? And she's just a
Yeah.
manifestation of his own psyche and his own processing of this, whatever problem he's facing. But it was in the moments where he's speaking to her, when he's desperate, when he's calling out to her in the midst of those scary moments. I think even looking at her portrait, there's a look that comes over his face before he analyzes the age of it. Just seeing it there, it's quite obvious how deeply connected these two people were. And then finally, she appears on screen, right? She physically manifests in his mind. She lays a single hand on his cheek to tell him to get off his arse. But
Yeah.
by contrast to her back turned physical presence, which was cold and detached, and very logical, right? Constantly pushing him to logic his way through this thing. In that moment, her actual physical presence, her face was so warm. The way she looked at him was so tender. I was just immediately sold on whatever time these two people shared together.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I am a Clara fan. I don't think I'd put her down as my number one companion of all time. Um, and there are a lot of different reasons for that. I think there are some legitimately good questions to ask about how well Stephen Moffat can write female characters is a question worth asking. I think also, without getting into spoilers, I would say of any companion ever in the history of Doctor Who, uh, no one has a more complicated character in terms of like lore and big swings and twists and timey wiminess. Clara comes with a lot of baggage and some really, some polarizing lore based decisions in the Doctor Whoniverse. That I think I have a higher opinion of than some fans. I really appreciate Jenna Coleman's performance as as Clara, and I was always a fan. If your new Doctor Who fandom catches fire and you make your way through New Who, you're gonna have a lot of questions for me the first time you see this actress appear again.
Really?
So that's all I'll say for now. But you're gonna have a lot of questions for me when you encounter Clara for the first time, and I cannot wait for it.
One last thing I do want to mention, because I don't know if it will be relevant as we continue to discuss, but I was very intrigued by his referring to her as teacher. Because if anything, I would imagine that traditionally the dynamic is the inverse of that. That if anything, he's perhaps mentor, she's mentee, he's leading the dynamic. But he was very open to whatever it is that she had to teach him, and that was what I think gave me the impression that she had such an impact on him, an effect on him in their time together. But also, she just appeared like a school teacher to me. Once he kept calling her teacher, and she was constantly at the blackboard, and then she appears with like her nice little like girl next door, Bob. She was very much like, oh yeah, that's your second grade teacher right there.
Yep. Good. I'm just gonna say good instincts, and then probably the thematic weight of calling her a teacher is even more important. But yeah, good instincts, Kris.
Can't wait to learn more.
All right. Okay. There is all sorts of talk about something called the hybrid in this episode. It's a dangerous secret. The Doctor knows who or what the hybrid is. At the end of the episode, he claims to be the hybrid. Do you have any thoughts, questions, or theories or confusion about this?
I think it fits into a sort of at least a facet of the prophecy trope, right? He mentions previously there were prophecies, stories, legends, even. And so I was getting real chosen one vibes, coming to bring balance. That was the vibe I was getting, right? This hybrid, whatever it really is believed by some to be a bringer of some ultimate state, whether it's destruction or peace. Like this person's going to end all of the conflict, all of the war, one way or the other.
Yeah.
Now, the announcement of this left me so many questions. What's a Time Lord? What's a Time War? What's a Dalek? All of those things. But in general, I think I had a basic understanding from genre storytelling in general about how this hybrid must fit into the lore.
Yeah, and all I was going to say is don't get too hung up on it. A staple of New Who is they always feel the need to bake in these little mysteries, sometimes mysterious terms and things like that. If you make it through season 9 of Eccleston, they're not trying to hide them. So I don't even think it's a spoiler to say you're going to keep hearing and seeing references to the phrase bad wolf over and over again. It's possible you've even seen a visual depiction of this somewhere and out in the universe through osmosis of nerds posting images online. But yeah, so the hybrid's in a long line of those. Some of these mysteries land in really organic and fulfilling ways. Some of them feel a little bit like red herrings or have twists that are less fulfilling than others. But yeah, your instincts are great. Once again, it's not something you need to get too hung up about or worry too much about.
Interesting to hear you say that, because I would have guessed this was like the or a through line from like the beginning to the end of Who.
Yes and no. I think some of your broader strokes about the Doctor story, it's always getting more and more complicated. There are new twists and turns. There was a new piece again, I won't tell you what it is, but there was a big new lore revelation towards the end of Jodie Whittaker's run about the Doctor on a long-term scale that was polarizing. It's something that I feel pretty okay about, but it was also something I thought they might abandon moving to a new showrunner in the 60th anniversary. But they are not. They've kept that lore front and center. So they find new ways to add new mystery and weight to the Doctor. And once you've got more Who under your belt, I will tell you my personal theory about the Doctor that I would love to see come to fruition someday if they ever end the series. But that's not worth getting into now. What were some design elements that were successful here in this episode? Could be costumes, effects, cinematography, staging. This episode looks pretty good. It's not the budget of a big film, but there's still some good choices in here. What stands out to you?
No, it does look good, honestly. And I think that it looks good in a way that reminds me of things that I have loved in my life. And I hope that folks who love Who don't take any of these things the wrong way, because I mean them as compliments. But like Spy Kids, remember the way that first Spy Kids movie looked and felt?
I've got to confess, I never saw Spy Kids. Perhaps this is a
Oh,
future episode.
that's a future episode for sure. Um, everything's very tactile, right? The castle that
Hmm.
he's in, every prop, every bit of the set, whether it's the big gears inside those sort of amber cages, um, it all felt like I could reach out and touch it, and it would be right there. That it had texture and it was real. I love that vibe. So it was that set that immediately stood out to me. Um, the big wide shots of the changing castle were cool, but it was when you were in the castle
Hmm.
and you were feeling the space that Capaldi was occupying that I really enjoyed. And then I liked the campy nature of the monster.
Hmm.
Those hands are silly looking in a really good way, like in a really
Oh yeah.
scary way. I didn't want those hands anywhere near me. And every time they wrapped around the doctor's face in the end, each time that he had to let it kill him, I was just so sorry that he had to let it touch him. The flies were haunting to me. I felt that motif was really powerful throughout, whether he was looking at a fly on a screen or experiencing the flies in and around that monster. That motif worked really, really well for me, selling the
Hmm.
horror vibes of it all. And then what else did I highlight here? Oh, all these first person perspectives that brought
Mm.
you into the horror genre of it all, whether it was a perspective looking at the screen or the perspective of the screen itself, looking into the castle world. Those moments were disturbing and discomforting in a effective
Hmm.
way.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about the tactile nature of this episode because I hadn't been back to this season for a while, and when you become a Whovian, one thing that people like to talk about is are the opening credits. They've changed so much over the years. The basic song is there, but it gets maybe some new orchestral flourishes or changes, or they go back to basics, or they play up the sci-fi sounds, or they replace them. And we're almost always getting a spacey, sort of psychedelic setting for the TARDIS spinning through those opening credits. But yeah, this was the season of this very geary, clockworky sequence, which was somewhat of a departure. So that's really baked into like the DNA, I think, of this whole season and the Capaldi run in a unique way. So I love that this, probably the best Capaldi episode, Heaven Sent, reflects that in such a direct way.
Oh yeah, I would have guessed because I loved the opening credits. I put it in my notes. The song, I was like, oh yeah, this is sci-fi. This has got a good vibe. I was loving it.
Yeah.
I assumed the gears were like part and parcel of Doctor Who, that it was, iconography of the IP because it's there in the opening credits, but then also the gears are all throughout this castle. It's an important part of how this machinery works. It's basic machinery. And then in the end, the monster collapse and he's all gears inside.
Hmm.
So I would have thought that gears were like a really important Doctor Who motif all throughout the runs.
Yeah, I think they can fit. I think it's another Moffat thing. He wrote several of my favorite episodes of Doctor Who in the first four seasons. And there's one season two episode, I believe, that has some clockwork creatures that are really memorable. Um, so yeah, I think it's partly a Moffat thing. I think it fits the vibe, but yeah, there's this tactile sort of thing going on. But yeah, what a cool design for this place. Capaldi's doctor says it's a killer puzzle box designed to scare me to death, and I'm trapped inside it. Must be Christmas.
Must be Christmas. That was a moment of levity as well that I should have highlighted earlier when we were talking about humor because that was really brilliantly delivered.
But yeah, I love the melding of like this old timey castle-y vibe, but yet you've got these cold screens everywhere, constantly showing the position of the creature moving forward.
Yeah, the screens gave me
It's
like
incredible.
asylum vibes, right? Instead of being medieval castle, they made it feel very asylumy in a disturbing way.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
And then one thing I didn't mention were the skulls. I had it in my notes and I don't want to forget.
Yeah.
Man, drowning would suck. As far as ways to die, drowning isn't on like my top five or anything, right? So when he hits the water and you're dealing with like, he's probably not going to drown, but it's, for the character. And then the skulls come into relief and you realize that he's just floating amongst a sea full of people who have already potentially, possibly drowned.
Mm-hmm.
Truly horrifying, a brilliant choice. And then as the skulls reappear elsewhere throughout, right? When he's up on the parapet and the skull is ever present. Um, great choice. Great choice.
Are there any other just really horrific elements of this episode that stand out to you? Because we've got the skulls. You mentioned some of these horror shots. Is there anything else here that just adds to that horrific vibe that's a part of this episode?
So there were two other moments where they did genuine jump scares. Right, he's in that little courtyard and he's got the shovel. And first he's shocked that the creature has set a trap. He thinks that it's up high. He's got an hour, and then it's at the door, and it bursts through in a way that catches the doctor by surprise, which is rare throughout. Despite this whole thing being a mystery, he never really shows any sense of surprise, except for in these jump scare moments, right? So that was horrifying. And then again, just the idea of digging a grave, which it didn't need to be that. It occurred to me as he was digging that hole that he was digging it like a grave. He was digging this perfectly square, deep hole, as opposed to a round hole, which you or I might, like, by default dig.
Right.
So anybody who's digging their own grave, that sets me on the edge of my seat, waiting to see like what's going to be at the bottom of that thing he's digging. Is it going to be a coffin with himself in it? And then instead of that, there's a little bit of a clue, and then another jump scare. Those hands come flying through the dirt, and that's the back of the hole. That got me good. That was a nice jump scare moment.
Absolutely. One thing I'll add to the horror of it all. Now, it'd been a while since I watched this episode, and this shot didn't necessarily stick with me, but it really struck me rewatching it for the podcast. When he's explaining the time loop, how he's managed to crawl as he's dying for a day and a half back to that teleportation room, so that he can reactivate the machine and get like that fresh copy of himself. He delivers the line, "All you need for energy is something to burn." And as he's saying this, he's attaching these electrodes to his head. And it's a genuinely troubling shot of his head. And we've already seen the ocean full of skulls and pieced together that these are his skulls from first 7,000 iterations and up to 2 billion. And I believe I said 4.5 billion in the summary. We don't get that number until the next episode. Hellbent. But so I believe the last on-screen number we get is 2 billion here, and then in the next episode he states 4.5 billion. So it turns out it was even more of an impossible to grasp time period.
Awful. Yeah, I noted that in your recap and didn't question it.
That amount of time is so scary. A strong childhood memory for me. I can't tell you how old I was, but I was quite young. You're in bed late at night. You're not tired. You're not falling asleep. You're thinking about the world and what you don't understand. And, I was thinking about what dying means. I was thinking about, I had been taught about concepts like heaven in a really literal sense. And I'll never forget, I was going through this logic in my head as a small child, and I terrified myself when I started trying to conceptualize the idea of existing forever, like what is an eternity, genuinely terrified me. I don't know if that's an experience you've had as well, but I'll never forget that. It's a part of me to this day.
Whoa. I mean, I get that. I can't say that I honestly have experienced it, but I get that, right? Trying to wrap your head around eternity is quite a bit. I think I find life in like days are exhausting. I can't imagine like, if there was no end point.
Yeah. Hey, quick plot question related to this. When the doctor pieces everything together and he realizes that bird means the story, and he's in this loop and he's discovering more and more terrifying numbers of years he's been through this, he says in this moment, "I can remember it. I can remember it all." And I don't think there's a fully satisfying answer to this to be found in the surrounding episodes. What was your take on that? Do you think that he is literally unlocking a memory in some way of all those billions of years? Or does he have a special ability to maybe conceptualize what that means? What was your take on that? Because I don't think there is a definitive right or wrong here.
I'm sure you're right that there is not, but I think I felt pretty squarely that he was somehow, and other plot holes here. I think so. There are a few nitpicks as far as plot holes throughout this time loop device.
Sure.
But I, I had the impression that he remembers each time, each iteration, each loop, because in that moment with Clara where he's unraveling, like right after right as he's figuring it all out, and he realizes it's a time loop and what he has to do, and he's lamenting, why do I have to keep doing it? How much longer can I do this for? And it could just be that he's talking about being the Doctor in general and all the regenerations and however long the Doctor has existed. But I think more literally, he's unraveling because he's wondering how many more times he can do this thing. That he remembers each one of his loops through, however long each loop is, I don't know. And I think that to me is a bit of a relief because he only remembers at the very end. If he,
right,
and each loop feels like it's relatively short, right? I don't know how long it takes him to get to that point each time, but if he could remember the whole time, that would be horrifying.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what about you? Do you think it's all coming back to him now, Celine Dion style?
Yeah, I'm inclined to take him literally. And I love your instincts there because if you watch Doctor Who, you develop a great capacity for what we call timey-wiminess in the Doctor Who universe and things stretching and the Doctor's, relationship to time travel, energy, and this, all sorts of pseudoscience-y mumbo jumbo. I like to think he can do it, and that capacity to hold information that a human being could not possibly process is part of what I love about the character. So I choose to believe that he is fully remembering it all in that moment. But I love your distinction about it's in those closing moments as he gets his next few punches in on that diamond wall.
I was really unsure about his physical prowess. He's punching that harder than diamond mineral in a way that makes any impact at all. But takes him 4 billion years to get through it, apparently 4.5 billion years. So I don't know if any one of us could do the same given the opportunity to do it over and over again.
Right.
So definitive strengths, super, super smart. Like perhaps the smartest, borderline, not clairvoyant, but like he's 15,000 steps ahead of us all. He's not 10 steps ahead. He's light years ahead. And so I think that most of his strength lives there. I assume with that probably comes some like craftiness and gadgetry that wasn't on display in this episode. I'm sure that he can cobble together a solution MacGyver style where needed. But that wasn't on display here. So I think I can only definitively say that he is like painfully smart. And then as far as weaknesses, I'm afraid to say it feels like he probably has some blind spots because of how arrogant he is.
1,000,000%. Yeah.
he comes out of that teleporter talking a big game. Like he is ready to take it to whoever. If you had anything to do with her death, you have done fucked up. And I'm sorry, I don't know if we swear in this podcast, but he certainly like seems like he's ready to he's ready to rock. But then he sets eyes on that monster just once and he's scared. And he's running scared. He went from I'm coming to find you, I hope you're ready, to oh my god, what the hell is that? And he's out of there. So I feel like his arrogance may be something that leaves him more vulnerable than he realizes.
Kris, this is exactly what I had in my notes as well for a weakness. Right. I skipped over that opening speech when I did the recap, and I'm really thankful you went back to it because he's talking about this relentlessness of time, of death approaching. It's coming for you, and you can run if you want, you can walk if you want, but it's coming. And we get that great speech. And when he first pops out of that teleporter, he says, I am the Doctor. I am coming to find you, and I will never, ever stop. So he thinks he is the unstoppable force. And he has to come to this vulnerable revelation by the end of the process that it's not him. There is a force greater than him. And it's a weakness. It's also that engaging vulnerability I keep bringing up over and over again. But yeah, those lines hit so differently once we see him just broken to his core. at the end of this episode, like towards the end of the episode. He finds that strength and that desire to win.
Hmm.
But yeah. And again, we've been kind of dancing around this one all day, but if I had started Who with this episode, it's a hell of a bird. I think this is a hell of a hero introduction. How does this stack up for you as the introduction to a hero?
Yeah, if this was, say, the origin story, the first story you're ever going to witness with this character, I don't understand how a person could not want to know more, to see more. I found myself curious about what kinds of baddies would go up against this type of a hero. And
Hmm.
so, because he was so obviously beyond us, so inhuman, but then in all that we've witnessed him live through, so desperately human, it in that way really worked for me amongst the best of hero introductions because they should feel distant and they should feel otherworldly and godly and bigger than us, but also like us.
Yes, yes, 1000 times yes. I agree with all of that. I also put in yet another one of my humorous lines here. He has that great line about, I hate gardening. What sort of person has a power complex about flowers? It's dictatorship for inadequates. Or to put it another way, it's dictatorship. Um, I love a hero that wants to fight for the little guy, that wants to fight against the abuse of power. That hell of a bird exclamation with the triumphant score in the background. The score, especially when you get to your Matt Smith era, I think they were like just they laid it on the thickest with giving Matt Smith these speeches with that hero score popping in the backgrounds. That's probably my favorite thing about the Matt Smith run. But you see a moment like that here at the end of the episode. But yeah, that hell of a bird line, and then his final words. Uh, Tell him I came the long way round. The hybrid, destined to conquer Gallifrey and stand in its ruins. It's me. What a badass moment. Um, and finally, Kris, we've been talking about this as well. Vulnerability of this character is really interesting. What was the most human thing about the Doctor? You know, we know he's inhuman, but what is the most human thing about him?
Him facing the loss of a person,
Yep.
right? A person close to him. And later in the episode, Clara has to explain, like, you're not the only person who's ever lost someone. It
Mm-hmm.
might feel like it, but you got to move forward. He's not just processing loss or grief, like I think most of us are probably familiar with. He's doing it alone.
Mm-hmm.
He's totally alone. And I think when you're in mourning, especially immediately after the moments of loss, the last thing you want to be is alone, right? And so as he's alone with his grief, and then he's coming to terms with all that he is going through, that he's facing his own death, that he is trapped here, that he might be a little in over his head. All of that feels so deeply human.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just unlocked something for me. You know, the Doctor says there are two events that every living being experiences but don't remember. You know, birth and death. He asks, is that why we stare into the eye sockets of skulls? Are we asking, does it hurt? You know, he says living being. So even this being that lives for a stretch of time and that it's tough for humans to fathom, who has this regeneration energy. On the one hand, it makes the Doctor more distant from death. On the other hand, you could argue that the Doctor's died a bunch of times and had to be, you know, reborn in a certain sense. There's this complexity to it. If we're talking inside baseball, Doctor Who nerdiness, like one thing they had just sorted out going into the 12th Doctor's run is this lingering question for Who nerds was, you know, there was supposed to be a limit on the number of regenerations a Time Lord could experience before they ran out, and we were coming up against that. And you know, they at this point they had worked their way around it. But you know, one smaller question the Doctor is grappling with is like, how am I even here? Do I now have unlimited regenerations? Am I going to keep regenerating forever? Is
Mm.
you know, he doesn't quite know what the future holds because he's broken the rule that he thought existed. So there's almost like a meta level beyond this this endless repetition. But yeah, and just maybe the simplest thing he says, the day you lose someone isn't the worst. At least you've got something to do. It's like lingering and the loneliness or the loss. And you can find joy through that when you find healthy ways to express it. But there's also accepting something, having a chance to take the time to let it sink in. And in a lot of ways, the doctor just lived through 4.5 billion days of not having the time to process his grief properly. Yeah, so a lot on the doctor's plate, for sure. Kris, as always, once again, you've just blown my mind with your ability to dig deep into a piece of media. We've gone longer than I ever could have imagined. And that just makes me happy because it means I can revisit this conversation now whenever I like. But before we go, did you have any parting thoughts, any takeaways you didn't get to cover?
No, nothing that can't be saved for future Who episodes. That's my biggest takeaway. Was I really enjoyed this episode. I can absolutely validate that Heaven Sent works on its own as like a short film. Like if you put that thing in front of me and said, "This is it. It exists in isolation. You will not know what came before. There is nothing that comes after." It absolutely works. It's a tremendously enjoyable narrative, so well portrayed. And so, yeah, that's the last I'll say about that.
Awesome. And I'll end on a light note. I asked you about a sonic screwdriver earlier. Believe it or not, Kris, you've seen one.
I have?
You have. You would not guess it because there was a brief period where one of the most controversial decisions in all of New Who history was when Peter Capaldi's doctor was like, it doesn't have to look like a screwdriver. It could be anything, like sunglasses. And you get to see him briefly scan the wall, the glasses. So they were the sonic sunglasses for a very brief period of time. So you got to catch a moment of sonic screwdriver controversy, which they reverted away from pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of annoyed by that, and I don't even have a vested interest in the sonic screwdriver yet. When he put those things on, they were so out of place. They felt anachronistic to like him. You know, he's in this velvety, swanky look. He's in this castle. Those sunglasses, I was like, Johnny Cage, what is happening? I was very disturbed by those sunglasses. I'm glad to know that it bothered fans too.
Yeah, well, it wasn't my favorite decision, I'll admit, but here we are. So before we officially end the episode, Kris, you've already answered my question of will there be more Doctor Who in the future? I was going to ask you where you want to start, but off mic, you told me that you were kind of putting your fate in my hands. So I'm going to recommend. I think you should go back to 2005, Christopher Eccleston, the first season of New Who, Rose. Go in with the understanding that the camp is very heavy with this one. Some of the camp is fun. Some of the camp is very dumb in this episode. But as someone like myself who loves Batman Returns, I know that you know how to have fun with camp, and you can look past it. And yeah, once you've got that season under your belt, let's chat again, and maybe we'll pick an episode to dig into, or something else. Maybe we'll try to look at a cross section, but I'll see what your impression was, and I think we'll know the answer at that time.
You are the doctor. I am your companion. Let's ride.
All right, and as always, I want to give you a chance to plug. If you have any projects coming up you want to talk about, or if you simply want to plug where people can find you on social media or anything like that, please let us know how we can find you.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. No big projects coming up, but please, if you want to hear more of my innate ramblings or see some cute pictures of my daughter, please follow me on Instagram. You'll find me at Kris_Ingersoll. It's Kris like Kringle. I promise you'll find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And you can find me, Randy Elaine, over on Twitter at Mr_Elaine. You can find a link to my Blue Sky profile from there. I've been having fun on that social media page. And also, I've been living my best life talking about entertainment stuff, contributing to the Pop Break Today. It's a great independently run entertainment website. They also run a ton of podcasts, including my music podcast, Every Pod You Cast, which is a disc by disc exploration of the discography of the Police. So we've got 2 episodes out for you to find through the Pop Break Today feed, and I hope you will check it out. Kris, I know we've got a lot of great conversations in our future. I can't wait for the next one. Have a fantastic night. Thanks again.
Thanks, Randy. Can't wait, brother.
All right. We will see you next time on Media Lit to talk about some more great literature. Thanks, everyone.